The humans left in silence, and the Galactic Council faced ruin. Part 1. Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that could hold 10,000 delegates from across the known universe. Today, every seat was filled. Every eye was watching, and every voice was silent as Ambassador Daniel Carter of Earth walked toward the center platform. Daniel was 53 years old. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and his face carried the lines of a man who had spent his life fighting battles with words instead of weapons. He had served humanity for 30 years, first as a diplomat on Earth, then as the voice of his species among the stars. He had believed, truly believed, that the galaxy could be a place of friendship and cooperation. Today, that belief was dying. High Councilor Vethran of the Dasari Dominion rose from his elevated seat. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes that held no warmth. The Dasari were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and they had never hidden their contempt for humanity. To them, humans were children playing at civilization. Newcomers who had only discovered faster than light travel 47 years ago. The Council recognizes Ambassador Carter of Earth, Vethran said, his voice echoing through the chamber. You stand accused of crimes against the sacred accords. Daniel kept his face calm. He had expected something like this for months. The Dasari had been making moves against Earth's growing trade networks, spreading rumors, blocking agreements. But he had not expected them to be so bold. I am ready to hear the charges, Daniel said. Vethran smiled, and it was not a kind smile. 3 cycles ago, a human research vessel was detected in the Kepler expanse. Our sensors indicate that this vessel was conducting experiments with forbidden energy sources. Energy sources that, under the sacred accords, no species may develop or possess. A murmur ran through the chamber. The sacred accords were the foundation of galactic law. They had been written 10,000 years ago, after a war that had destroyed entire star systems. Any species that violated them faced severe punishment. Daniel shook his head. The vessel you speak of was conducting standard geological surveys. We have complete records of their activities. I request permission to present our evidence. Denied, Vethran said immediately. The Council has already reviewed the evidence provided by the Dasari Dominion. We find it sufficient. Daniel felt his heart grow cold. He looked around the chamber, searching for any sign of support. The Sindari delegate, a female named Mirith, was watching him with amusement. The Dravik representative had his arms crossed and his face turned away. Even the Valani, who had always been friendly to Earth, would not meet his eyes. This is not justice, Daniel said, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. This is politics. The Dasari fear humanity's growth. They fear our trade agreements, our technological advances, our friendships with other species. So they create false accusations to push us down. Vethran laughed. You see how arrogant they are? A species that has been among the stars for less than 50 years. And already, they believe themselves equal to civilizations that have existed for millennia. Mirith spoke up from her seat, her voice sharp and mocking. Perhaps the humans should learn their place. The galaxy functioned perfectly well before they arrived. It will function perfectly well after they are put in their proper position. More laughter echoed through the chamber. In the observation gallery above, Lieutenant Lisa Monroe watched with tears in her eyes. She was 28 years old, one of the youngest members of the diplomatic staff. She had grown up reading stories about humanity's first contact with alien life, about the hope and wonder of joining a galactic community. Those stories had not prepared her for this. They are not even pretending to be fair, she whispered to the officer beside her. He shook his head. They never were. Below, the Council began its vote. One by one, each species declared their position. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The word repeated like a hammer blow, crushing any hope that remained. When the vote was complete, Vethran read the sentence with obvious pleasure. Earth is hereby sanctioned under Article 7 of the Sacred Accords. All trade agreements are suspended. All human vessels are banned from Council space. All technological exchanges are terminated. Earth will be quarantined until the Council determines that humanity has learned proper respect for galactic law. Daniel stood alone on the platform, surrounded by species who had just condemned his people based on lies. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting for him to beg, to plead, to threaten. They expected humans to react with emotion, with anger, with the passion that aliens found so amusing and so primitive. But Daniel Carter did not beg. He did not plead. He did not threaten. Instead, he straightened his back and looked directly at Vethran. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear, reaching every corner of the Great Hall. Humanity came to the stars seeking friendship. We offered our knowledge freely. We shared our technology without asking for payment. We built hospitals on worlds that had never known modern medicine. We fed populations that were starving. We asked for nothing in return except to be treated as equals. He paused, letting the words sink in. You have answered our friendship with contempt. You have answered our generosity with accusations. You have shown us exactly what the galaxy thinks of humanity. Daniel turned slowly, looking at each section of the chamber in turn. So be it. Earth will comply with your sanctions. We will withdraw from Council space. Every human ship, every human diplomat, every human worker will leave within 72 hours. Vethran waved his hand dismissively. Good. Perhaps now you understand your place. Daniel shook his head. No, High Counselor. I do not think you understand. We are not leaving because you have defeated us. We are leaving because we finally see the truth. You do not want partners. You want servants. And humanity will never be a servant to anyone. He took a deep breath. We will leave in silence, and you will have your galaxy back, exactly as it was before we arrived. I hope it brings you the peace you seek. With those words, Daniel Carter walked out of the chamber. Lisa Monroe and the rest of the human delegation followed him. No one tried to stop them. No one said goodbye. Within 72 hours, as promised, every human presence in Council space was gone. Ships departed. Embassies closed. Research stations went dark. The humans left without violence, without threats, without any final words. They simply left. And in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, the delegates celebrated. Vethran accepted congratulations from his allies. Mirith joked that the galaxy would finally know peace without human interference. None of them noticed the silence that remained after the humans were gone. None of them understood what that silence would cost. The humans left in silence, and the Galactic Council faced ruin part. 2-3 months passed after the humans left, on Thessa Prime, the capital world of the Sari Dominion. The first signs of trouble appeared in the agricultural zones. Farmers in the southern continent reported that their crops were dying. The leaves turned brown and fell. The fruit rotted before it could be picked. Within weeks, the problem spread to every farm on the planet. Minister Calver stood in the dying fields with a group of scientists. He was responsible for food production across all the Sari worlds, and he did not understand what he was seeing. The soil looked healthy. The weather was perfect. The seeds were the same genetically modified varieties that had produced record harvests for the past 15 years. What is happening? He demanded. The lead scientist, an elderly female named Drathine, shook her head slowly. The seeds require a specific treatment to activate their growth cycle. Without this treatment, they cannot absorb nutrients from the soil properly. Then apply the treatment. We cannot, Minister. We do not have it. Calver felt his stomach drop. What do you mean you do not have it? Drathine looked at him with tired eyes. The treatment was developed by human agronomists. They applied it every season as part of our joint farming program. When the humans left, they took their methods with them. We assumed we could replicate their work, but we have failed. The chemical formula is unlike anything in our records. Then contact Earth. Demand they provide the treatment. Minister, Earth is under quarantine. No communication is permitted. And even if we could contact them, why would they help us? We voted to sanction them. Calver stood in silence as the wind carried the smell of rotting crops across the field. 7 Nasari worlds used the same seeds. 7 worlds that would soon face famine far across the galaxy. On the gleaning stations of the Sindari Collective, a different kind of crisis was unfolding. Councilor Mirith sat in her private office, staring at the communication screen that showed only static. For the past 3 weeks, the Collective's faster-than-light communication network had been failing. Messages were delayed. Signals were lost. Entire sectors had gone dark. "Explain this to me," she said to the technician kneeling before her. "The network has functioned perfectly for 200 years. Why is it failing now?" The technician, a young male named Sevath, kept his eyes on the floor. Speaking bad news to Mirith was dangerous. She was known for her temper. The network was upgraded 18 years ago, Counselor. Human engineers worked alongside our technicians to improve speed and reliability. They integrated their software protocols into our system core. So remove them? We have tried, Counselor, but the human code is woven into every layer of the network. Removing it would require us to rebuild the entire system from the beginning. That would take years and cost more resources than the Collective can afford. Marath slammed her hand on the desk. This is absurd. We built star-spanning civilizations before humans even discovered fire. How can we be dependent on their primitive technology? Sevath finally looked up, and there was something in his eyes that might have been courage or might have been desperation. Because their technology was not primitive, Counselor. It was different. They solved problems in ways we never considered. We thought we were using them, but perhaps they were filling gaps we did not know we had. Maraith dismissed him with a wave. After he left, she sat alone in the darkness, listening to the static that had replaced the voices of 100 worlds. On the mining colonies of the Dravic hegemony, the situation was even worse. The Dravic were a warrior species, proud and fierce. They had conquered a dozen star systems through strength alone. But their economy depended on the rare minerals extracted from asteroid belts and barren moons. And the machines that extracted those minerals were falling silent. Commander Grathnak stood in the main processing facility on Mining Station 7, watching his workers struggle with equipment that refused to function. The massive drilling machines had been built through a joint venture with human engineers 5 years ago. They were faster and more efficient than anything the Dravic had ever created. They were also impossible to repair. The parts do not exist in our supply chain, his chief engineer reported. The humans manufactured key components on Earth and shipped them to us as needed. We never thought to stockpile them. Grathnak growled low in his throat. Then we build new machines. Our own machines. Commander, the old machines would take 3 times as long to extract the same amount of ore. And we no longer have the skilled workers to operate them. Our young ones were trained only on human technology. The mining output of the hegemony dropped by 60% within 2 months. Without minerals, they could not build ships. Without ships, they could not maintain their military. And without their military, the Dravic were nothing. Not every species had celebrated the human departure. Ambassador Cathor of the Volani Republic and watched the council vote with a heavy heart. He had spoken privately against the sanctions, warning his colleagues that the accusations were clearly false. that Earth had been nothing but a good partner. But when the vote came, he had raised his hand with the others. Political pressure from the Thesari had made any other choice impossible. Now, 3 months later, he sat in his office and read reports that made him sick with guilt. The Volani medical system had been transformed by human pharmaceutical exports. Diseases that had killed millions were now easily treatable with human medicines. But those medicines were no longer coming. Supplies were running out. Hospitals were beginning to turn away patients. Cathor made a decision that could cost him his career. He opened a secret communication channel, one that bypassed official networks and sent a message directly to Earth. He did not beg. He simply told the truth. He explained that his people were suffering, that children were dying from illnesses that human medicines could cure in days. He asked if there was any possibility of humanitarian aid. The response came 3 days later. Secretary General Nathan Price of the United Earth Government appeared on Cathor's screen. He was a tall man with dark skin and gray hair, and his face showed no anger, only sadness. "Ambassador Cathor," he said, "I remember when you visited Earth 10 years ago. You spoke at the United Nations about the importance of interstellar friendship. You said that the galaxy was better with humanity in it." Cathor nodded slowly. "I remember. And then you voted to condemn us based on lies." "I did. I'm not proud of it." Price was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again, and his voice was gentle but firm. "Humanity feels great sympathy for the suffering of your people, Ambassador. Truly we do. But the Galactic Council declared us unworthy of civilized company. They said the galaxy functioned perfectly well without us. They laughed as we walked away." He leaned forward. "Perhaps the worthy species of the galaxy can solve their own problems. Perhaps they do not need the help of primitive humans after all." The screen went dark. Cathor sat alone in his office for a long time, thinking about the choices he had made and the prices people would pay for them. Outside his window, the stars continued to shine, cold and indifferent to the suffering below. The humans left in silence, and the Galactic Council faced ruin Part 3 1 year after humanity left the stars. The Galactic Council met again in the Great Hall of Nexus Prime, but this time there was no celebration. There was no laughter. There was only fear. The chamber that had once held 10,000 delegates now contained fewer than 60. Many species could no longer afford to send representatives. Others had fallen into civil war and had no functioning government to represent. The empty seats stretched across the hall like wounds that refused to heal. High Counselor Vethron was gone. 3 months after the human departure, when famine spread across 7 Thesari worlds, his own people had removed him from power. Some said he was in prison. Others said he was dead. No one cared enough to find out the truth. His replacement was a younger female named Sithara. She had risen to power by promising to fix what Vethron had broken. But she was discovering that some things could not be fixed so easily. She stood at the central platform, the same place where Daniel Carter had stood 1 year ago, and addressed what remained of galactic civilization. "The reports from across our territories are clear," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "The Thesari agricultural crisis has spread to 14 worlds. Food riots have killed thousands. Our emergency reserves will last perhaps 6 more months." She looked around the chamber. The Sindari communication network remains crippled. Without reliable faster-than-light messaging, 3 border wars have broken out between species who can no longer negotiate. The death toll is already in the millions and climbing. A murmur of despair ran through the delegates. The Dravic hegemony has lost 70% of its mining capacity. Without raw materials, starship production across the galaxy has nearly stopped. Many worlds are now isolated, unable to receive supplies or send for help. Sithara paused. When she spoke again, Her voice was barely above a whisper. "We did this to ourselves. We drove away the one species that was holding our civilization together. And now we are paying the price." Councilor Marith of the Sindari rose from her seat. She looked older than she had 1 year ago. The constant crisis had drained her, and her famous sharp tongue had grown dull. "What do you suggest we do?" she asked. "Beg the humans to return? They will never forgive us." "Perhaps not," Sathara admitted. "But we must try. We have no other choice." Far from the council chamber in the abandoned human embassy on Nexus Prime, a young man sat alone in the darkness. Kevin Walsh was 31 years old. He had been assigned to the embassy as a junior communications officer just 2 weeks before the sanctions were announced. When the withdrawal order came, he had volunteered to stay behind and operate the automated monitoring systems. Someone needed to keep watch, to record what happened after humanity left. For 1 year, he had lived alone on the station, eating preserved rations and watching the galaxy fall apart. Every day, he sent detailed reports back to Earth. He documented the food shortages, the communication failures, the wars that erupted without warning. He watched as species that had mocked humanity now struggled to survive. Without human help, he felt no pleasure in their suffering. He had believed in the dream of galactic cooperation. He had wanted humanity to have friends among the stars. Watching that dream die was painful, even if the death was deserved. Today, his communication screen lit up with an incoming message from Earth. Secretary General Nathan Price appeared, looking tired but determined. "Kevin, I have news. 17 species have sent secret delegations to Earth, asking for bilateral treaties outside Council authority. They want our help, and they are willing to pay for it." Kevin leaned forward. "What kind of payment?" "Public acknowledgement of the false accusations. Trade agreements on our terms. And most importantly, recognition that humanity is not a lesser species to be controlled, but an equal partner to be respected. Will Earth accept?" Price nodded slowly. "We will negotiate. We will help those who are willing to admit their mistakes. But we will never again put ourselves under the authority of a council that treats us with contempt." The screen went dark, and Kevin sat back in his chair. Something had changed. Humanity was no longer begging to be accepted. Now others were begging humanity for help. The power had shifted. On Earth, in the command center of the orbital defense platform known as Constellation, Admiral Patricia Dunn reviewed the latest intelligence reports. She was 58 years old, a veteran of Earth's small but growing space force. She had never wanted war with anyone, but she had always believed in being prepared. Her aide, Commander Derek Hayes, stood beside her, pointing at the holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. "Admiral, the Dazari military is in complete disarray. Their ships are grounded without fuel. The Sindari fleet is scattered across 100 systems, unable to coordinate. The Dravic warriors are fighting each other over what little resources remain." Don studied the display carefully. "And the other species? Most are focused on survival. They have no capacity for external conflict." He paused, then spoke more quietly. "Admiral, this might be our moment. If we wanted to press our advantage, to demand more than just treaties, we could probably take control of significant territory without firing a shot." Dunn turned to look at him directly. Her eyes were hard. "And then what, Commander? We become the new tyrants of the galaxy? We rule through fear instead of friendship." Derek lowered his gaze. "I apologize, Admiral. I was only presenting the option. I know, and I want you to understand why we will never take it." She turned back to the display. "Humanity did not cause this collapse. We simply stopped helping. There is a difference between refusing to be a servant and choosing to be a master. We will defend our worlds. We will protect our people. But we will not become the thing we hated. She gave orders for the fleet to maintain defensive positions only. No aggressive moves. No exploitation of the chaos. If the galaxy wants our help, she said, they will have to ask for it properly. And they will have to mean it. Back on Nexus Prime, the emergency council session continued through the night. Delegates argued and blamed each other for the disaster. Old alliances shattered. New accusations flew across the chamber. Through it all, Sithara tried to maintain order, but she was fighting a losing battle. The Galactic Council, which had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, was dying. And everyone in the chamber knew it. Finally, as the artificial dawn broke over the station, she called for silence. We have debated enough. We have blamed each other enough. Now we must act. She took a deep breath. I propose that we send a formal delegation to Earth, not to demand, not to threaten, but to apologize, to admit that we were wrong, and to ask humbly if humanity will give us another chance. The chamber fell silent. Mirith spoke first. The Sindari will support this proposal. One by one, other delegates added their voices. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, the council that had once looked down on humanity would bow its head and ask for forgiveness. Whether humanity would grant that forgiveness remained to be seen. The humans left in silence, and the Galactic Council faced ruin part 4-2. Years had passed since humanity walked away from the stars. The Galactic Council no longer existed in any meaningful way. The Great Hall on Nexus Prime stood dark and empty, its power systems failing, its corridors silent. The station that had once been the center of galactic civilization was now a floating tomb. A monument to pride and foolishness. Ambassador Kethor of the Vellani Republic stood at the window on a small transport ship, watching Earth grow larger against the black void of space. He had made this journey alone, without guards or staff. This was not an official diplomatic mission. This was a personal pilgrimage. The Vellani had suffered terribly over the past 2 years. Without human medicines, diseases that had been controlled for decades returned with devastating force. Millions died. Hospitals became places of despair rather than healing. Kethor had watched his own sister fade away from an illness that a simple human treatment could have cured. He did not come to Earth expecting forgiveness. He came because he needed to try. The transport landed at a facility outside the city of Geneva, where the United Earth government had established its new headquarters for interstellar affairs. Kethor was met by a young human officer who escorted him through clean white corridors to a meeting room that overlooked a beautiful lake, surrounded by mountains. Secretary General Nathan Price was already waiting. Along with Admiral Patricia Dunn, they rose as Kethor entered, and Price offered his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Ambassador Kethor, thank you for coming. Kethor took the offered hand. The touch felt strange but not unpleasant. Thank you for receiving me, Secretary General. I know you had no obligation to do so. They sat around a simple table. No servants. No recording devices. Just 3 individuals trying to find a path forward through the wreckage of the past. Kethor spoke first. He had prepared many things to say, arguments and justifications and explanations. But when the moment came, he set all of that aside and simply told the truth. My people are dying, he said. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily. Every day, we lose more. And every day, I remember that I helped make this happen. I voted against humanity. I raised my hand with the others because I was afraid of what Vethran might do to my world if I stood alone. I told myself it was the smart choice, the safe choice. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was thick with emotion. It was not smart. It was not safe. It was cowardly. I failed your people when you needed an ally, and now my people pay the price for my failure. Price listened without interrupting. When Cathor finished, the Secretary General was quiet for a long moment. "Ambassador," he said finally, "I appreciate your honesty. It would have been easy to make excuses, to blame others, to pretend you had no choice. The fact that you accept responsibility means something. But it does not change what happened," Dawn added, her voice harder than Price's. "Your vote helped condemn humanity based on lies. That cannot be undone." "I know," Cathor said. "I do not ask you to forget. I only ask you to tell me what humanity requires. What must my people do to earn your help?" Price and Dunn exchanged a look. They had discussed this possibility many times over the past months. Now the moment had arrived. "We require 3 things," Price said. "First, public acknowledgement. Every species must know what truly happened. The false accusations must be officially retracted, and those who fabricated the evidence must face justice under their own laws." Cathor nodded. "The Dazari have already begun this process. Sithara, their new leader, has been gathering evidence of Vethra's conspiracy. She intends to release it publicly." "Good. Second, we require new terms of engagement. Humanity will not return to a council that places us beneath other species. Any future alliance must recognize Earth as an equal partner with full voting rights and veto power over decisions that affect our interests. That is reasonable. Third," Price continued, leaning forward, "we require patience. Humanity will help rebuild the galaxy. We will share our technology, our knowledge, our resources. But trust must be earned slowly. We will not rush into partnerships that might betray us again." Cathor was silent for a moment, absorbing these terms. They were demanding but fair. More fair, perhaps, than humanity had any obligation to be. "I accept these terms on behalf of the Villani Republic," he said. "I cannot speak for other species, but I believe many will agree. We have learned painfully how much we needed humanity. We will not make the same mistake twice." Admiral Dunn spoke again. "Ambassador, I have a question. Why did the Dazari target humanity? The accusations were clearly false. What did they hope to gain?" Cathor sighed. "Fear. They feared you. Not because you were primitive, but because you were advancing too quickly. In 47 years, humanity went from first contact to becoming a major economic and technological force. At that rate of growth, you would have surpassed the elder races within a century. Vethran and his allies decided to stop you before that could happen. By destroying us? By containing you. They thought the sanctions would force Earth into dependency, make you beg for readmission on their terms." Cathor shook his head. "They never imagined you would simply leave. They never considered what would happen if you did." Price almost smiled. "Humanity has a long history of being underestimated. Far across the galaxy, on the shattered world of Lesser Prime, Sithara prepared for the most important broadcast of her life. The agricultural crisis had stabilized somewhat, but only because billions had already died. The survivors were angry, traumatized, and desperate for someone to blame. For months, Sithara had carefully built her case, gathering records and testimonies and evidence that proved what many already suspected. Now it was time to tell the truth. She sat before a communication array that would carry her message to every surviving world in the galaxy. Her hands trembled slightly as she activated the transmission. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, "I speak to you today not as High Counselor, but as a fellow being who has witnessed the consequences of terrible decisions. What I am about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but you deserve the truth." She took a deep breath. 2 years ago, my predecessor, Vethran, brought accusations against humanity that led to their expulsion from galactic society. Those accusations were false. Completely and deliberately false. Veteran fabricated evidence of human violations because he feared humanity's growing influence. He convinced other council members to support the sanctions through threats and political manipulation. The weight of the words seemed to press down on her. The humans did nothing wrong. They were good partners, generous allies, and faithful friends. And we repaid them with lies and contempt. The disasters that have followed, the famines, the wars, the collapse of our civilization, these are the consequences of our actions. We did this to ourselves. She looked directly into the recorder, as if speaking to every individual who would hear her voice. I cannot undo what was done. I cannot bring back the millions who have died. But I can acknowledge the truth, and I can beg those who remain to learn from our mistake. Pride nearly destroyed us. Perhaps humility can save us. The transmission ended. Sithara sat alone in the silence, wondering if her words would change anything. Across the galaxy, beings of 100 species watched her confession. Some were angry. Some were relieved. Some simply wept. And on Earth, in the headquarters of the United Earth Government, Secretary General Nathan Price watched the broadcast with Ambassador Cathor beside him. When it ended, Price turned to the alien diplomat. It seems the galaxy is finally ready to listen. Cathor nodded slowly. The question is whether humanity is ready to speak. Price considered this for a long moment. Then he rose from his chair and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains and the lake and the blue sky that humans had almost abandoned in their rush to the stars. "We are ready," he said. "But we will speak on our own terms. And we will never forget the lesson we learned here. Kindness is not weakness. But kindness given to those who do not value it is kindness wasted." He turned back to face Cathor. "Let us hope the galaxy has learned the same lesson." The humans left in silence, and the Galactic Council faced ruin part 5 years after humanity walked away from the stars. A new station floated in orbit around Mars. It was called Unity Station, and it was the most beautiful thing ever built by the combined efforts of multiple species. The station was not as large as Nexus Prime had been. It did not try to impress through size alone. Instead, it impressed through design, through the way different architectural styles blended together into something greater than any single vision could have created. Human practicality mixed with Vellani elegance. The Zari precision joined with Sindari creativity. Even the Dravik had contributed, their warrior aesthetic adding strength and solidity to the structure. 23 species had signed the Geneva Compact over the past 3 years. Each had publicly acknowledged the wrongs done to humanity. Each had agreed to new terms of partnership based on mutual respect and equal standing. And each had sent representatives to this moment. The first session of the Compact Assembly. Secretary General Nathan Price, older now but still sharp, stood at the podium in the central chamber. He looked out at the assembled delegates, beings of different shapes and sizes and colors, all watching him with attention and respect. He thought about everything that had led to this moment. The accusations and the sanctions. The silent withdrawal. The years of collapse and suffering. The slow, painful process of rebuilding trust. It had been a hard road, and many had not survived to see its end. But those who remained had learned something important. 5 years ago, Price began, humanity faced a choice. We could fight against those who wronged us, or we could simply walk away. We chose to walk away, not because we were weak, but because we understood something that others did not. He paused, letting the silence fill the chamber. We understood that sometimes the strongest response to hatred is not more hatred. Sometimes the most powerful answer to contempt is not revenge. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let others see the truth for themselves. He looked around the chamber. meeting the eyes of delegates who had once mocked humanity. The galaxy learned a difficult lesson in our absence. It learned that cooperation is not weakness. It learned that sharing knowledge freely benefits everyone. It learned that judging others based on fear and pride leads only to destruction. Counselor Sithara of the Dasari sat in the front row. Her people had suffered more than most, and their recovery would take generations. But she listened to Price's words with gratitude, not resentment. She knew the Dasari had brought their suffering upon themselves. Humanity did not seek this moment, Price continued. We did not plan for the collapse of galactic civilization. We did not rejoice when others suffered. We simply lived our lives, protected our worlds, and waited to see if anyone would understand what they had lost. He smiled slightly. Many did understand. And now we are here together, building something new. Not a council where some species rule over others. Not an alliance based on fear or domination, but a true partnership where every voice matters and every contribution is valued. Ambassador Cathor of the Vellani Republic rose to respond. He had aged in the past 5 years, and his movements were slower than they once were. But his eyes were clear, and his voice was strong. Secretary General Price speaks of lessons learned, he said. I would add one more. We learned that character is revealed in moments of crisis. When humanity was accused and condemned, they could have fought. They could have raged. They could have sought revenge when we were vulnerable. Instead, they walked away with dignity. And when we came to them in our time of need, they offered terms that were firm but fair. He turned to face the full assembly. The Vellani believed for centuries that we were wise and civilized. We looked at humans and saw a young species, emotional and impulsive. We were wrong. Humanity showed us what true wisdom looks like. It looks like patience. It looks like restraint. It looks like the courage to hold out your hand to those who once slapped it away. Mirath of the Sindari spoke next. She had changed much in 5 years. The sharp mockery that had once defined her was gone, replaced by something quieter and more thoughtful. I was among those who laughed when humanity left, she admitted. I said the galaxy would be better without them. I was a fool. The galaxy nearly died without them. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for my foolishness. One by one, other delegates rose to speak. Each told their own story of the years of collapse. Each acknowledged the mistakes their species had made. And each pledged to honor the new alliance with actions. Not just words. In the observation gallery above the chamber, Admiral Patricia Dunn watched the proceedings with her aide, Captain Derek Hayes. He had been promoted twice in 5 years, and his early suggestion of conquest seemed like a distant memory from another life. Do you think this will last, Admiral? He asked quietly. Dunn considered the question. Below, delegates who had once been enemies were shaking hands and exchanging gifts. It was a beautiful sight, but she knew beauty could be deceptive. I do not know, she admitted. History tells us that alliances come and go. Trust can be broken as easily as it is built. But I believe we have a better chance now than we did before. Why? Because the galaxy has seen what happens without us. They know the cost of treating humanity with contempt. That knowledge will not prevent all future conflicts, but it will make them think twice before starting new ones. She turned away from the gallery. Our job is to be ready for whatever comes, to defend our people if necessary, and to hope that necessity never arrives. On Earth, in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, retired Ambassador Daniel Carter sat in his garden. He was 60 years old now, and his body did not move as easily as it once had. But his mind was sharp, and his heart was at peace. His granddaughter Amy sat beside him on the old wooden bench. She was 22 years old, bright and ambitious. And she had just received word that she had been accepted into the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. "Grandfather," she said, "I watched the recordings of your speech to the council, the day you told them humanity would leave in silence. I have watched it many times." Daniel nodded. He rarely thought about that day anymore. It belonged to another version of himself, a younger man who still believed the galaxy might welcome humanity as friends. "What did you think?" he asked. "I thought you were incredibly brave. Everyone expected you to beg or threaten. Instead, you just told them the truth and walked away." Daniel smiled softly. It did not feel brave at the time. It felt like the only choice available. They had decided to hate us, and nothing I could say would change their minds. So I stopped trying. Amy was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "I am going to represent humanity among the stars. I am going to meet species who once voted to condemn us. How should I act? What should I remember?" Daniel set down the gardening tool he had been holding and looked at his granddaughter with eyes full of love and pride. "Remember that kindness is not weakness," he said. "The galaxy learned that lesson the hard way. Do not let them forget it." "What else?" "Remember that patience is not surrender. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is wait. Let others make their mistakes. Let them see the consequences. You cannot force wisdom on anyone. You can only create the conditions where wisdom becomes possible." Amy nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "And one more thing," Daniel added. "Sometimes the best thing you can do is simply walk away. Not in anger, not in despair, but in the quiet confidence that you know your own worth, even if others do not." He looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the evening light. "Humanity left in silence," he said. "And in that silence, the galaxy finally learned to listen. That is the lesson, Amy. That is what you must remember." Amy took her grandfather's hand and sat with him as darkness fell over the garden. Above them, the stars sparkled with the light of 1,000 worlds, all now joined together in a partnership that had been forged in pain and sealed in hope. The old Galactic Council was gone forever. The new compact assembly was just beginning. And humanity, the species that had once been mocked as primitive and young, now stood at the center of a galaxy that had finally learned to appreciate what it had almost lost. The silence had spoken louder than any words, and the galaxy would never forget its message.